So this week, a ton going on, Jimmy. We have Build, we have Google I/O, and then OpenAI never sits quiet. So of course, there are a lot of stuff going on that front as well that we need to cover.
Yeah, that this week is jam packed. It seems like it's a conference week, so a lot to cover. And today we will focus on the Microsoft build. So that'll be top of our agenda to discuss.
Absolutely. Stay tuned, everybody, for a quick introduction, and we'll be back. Greetings. Welcome to the AI Files podcast. If you're looking to stay up to date on the AI, this is the podcast for you. I'm Shadab Hussain. I'm the director of AI at Microsoft, and I'm your co-host.
Hello, everybody. Jamie Basilico, as you know already. I'm the other co-host here for the AI Files. My day job is a data and AI technical specialist and architect. And as a reminder, please note this is not an official Microsoft channel, so the views and opinions expressed by myself and Shadab are our own and do not represent the views of Microsoft.
Jimmy, just a couple of quick news items. We are going to do a very quick fire one, among the most important news, and then get started with the build, Microsoft build. There's tons of announcements that we need to cover. And one of the latest news is essentially Jony Ive, the famous designer behind all Apple devices like iPhone, iPad, Watch, etc. He's actually going to now lead OpenAI's design work after the $6.5 billion acquisition of his company. Company was named IO. And that company, in fact, OpenAI had already had a stake in it, 23% stake. They already had, now they've fully acquired it. As part of that, Jony Ive will now work with OpenAI and lead the hardware device effort. The hardware device that Sam Altman has been very gung-ho about.
Yeah, I was going to say, that the device angle is. I look at it this way. I mean, we've gone through, generative AI, ChatGPT. The models have, gained multimodality capabilities over the last, whatever it's been, 2 years, 2.5 years. The models are getting, more capable with reasoning. We've seen all these things. We're on this next what's next kind of question, and the devices to me are certainly one that is ripe. We've seen Meta and their glasses. I will talk a little bit about the Google I/O, but they're going down the path of hardware as well, or devices. I see OpenAI kind of expanding their portfolio, and this makes total sense. And they're certainly getting a very bright and capable person in Jony to help lead that effort. So I'm anxious.
Yeah, and they seem to be already working on it. So they have already something in mind that they're coming up. It's supposed to be making a debut in 2026. Now, here's the thing, right? Apple, of course, has something to worry about, because whoever controls the distribution channel will actually rule the roost. Um, Google does that because Google controls. That's why they try to make their Chrome browser, because whoever is on browser can easily control where people head to. Apple controls phones, and that's why they have control over the distribution channel. Now, however, if the things change from phone to something else, if there is who, I don't know what that would be, it's some sort of wearable, maybe, um, you know, on the neck or on the head, or glasses or on rings. I don't know where that would be, but it would be fun to see if Jony and Sam, I would say, collaborating, what else new they can come up with. It would be fun for sure, whatever they come with.
Yep, for sure.
And by the way, the dangers of AI is never behind. There's always somebody trying to use the AI and essentially creating deep fakes, or even genuine images, like even if it is a real images, but explicit content of non-consensual, particularly explicit images. And that is now, with the new act, has been criminalized. So President Trump has signed a new act called Take It Down, and this bill now criminalizes the revenge porn and explicit deep fakes. Anything that is for distributing essentially non-consensual explicit images. It doesn't matter whether it's authentic or AI generated. It's basically, it's about non-consent. Essentially, that's what it is. And under the new law, essentially, the social media companies and online platforms, they must remove such material within 48 hours of notice from the victim. And the
Yeah,
plot and the platform has to ensure that even the duplicate content has to be removed.
I'm surprised that there wasn't a law like this already. And maybe there was, and it was about how things were being enforced. But um, I'm just surprised.
That is true. I mean, like, it seems like you're okay. Like, what is this? Um, but I don't know. Maybe, or maybe there were some loopholes. Who knows what it was? But First Lady was actually particularly also involved in canvassing for this one.
Cool. So on to other news. There is Google I/O, like we mentioned at the top of the show. Google I/O also is running their developer conference this week, same as Microsoft. We will devote a whole show to Google I/O on our next episode or one shortly thereafter, because there's a lot that they put into announcement. This will be somewhat of a teaser, if you will, but there's a lot of different things, both from the consumer side and then also for the developers. Everything from full scope releases of the Gemini 2.5 models being. They also rolled out updates and uh, updates as well as directional on where Project Astra and Project Mariner. Again, real time understanding, task automation, things also that they released as far as combining all of their image and video into a single platform or studio to help with generation of those creatives, if you will. We talked a little bit about like their hardware, their devices, in terms of the smart glasses. There's also workspace enhancements, bringing in AI into the things that, if you're a Google user like Gmail, Meet, um, all those things just from their productivity being able to be interwoven. They also introduced plans or different tiers in terms of the pro and ultra tiers against their AI features. So these are all things that will go more in depth. Like I said, what did I just do? Maybe about 30 seconds on what Google I/O is, but there's a lot to cover in each one of these. And we'll do that, like I said, next episode or shortly thereafter.
True. I think one of the things that Jimmy, that is very clear is from Google's event. There's tons of focus on consumers, and you can see that lots of their products is about the devices, the wearables, the media oriented kind of features, etc. And Google has a big repository of those content, so it's easy for them to actually train and create these things. Makes sense. And this is where I see the compartmentalization a little bit. Like OpenAI is really good as an overall, plus they are focused on agentic a lot. Similarly with Microsoft, a lot of agents in the enterprise, but also they're focusing on the developer, right? Anthropic focus a lot on the developer and coding area, and Google is trying to focus, I think, a lot on the media and the consumer, etc. Now that doesn't mean that they're trying to confine themselves, but I'm saying that they're just emerging strongest in those areas. They of course are fighting it out in all other area. Overall, agentic is a theme anyway. Everybody knows agent is just going to be a much bigger uh, prize possession. So I think everybody's fighting for that out anyway.
Yep.
Okay, take me to build, Jamie. What happened at the build?
So there's a lot at Build. So where do you want to go with Build? You want to talk about Foundry? You want to talk about Copilot? Where would you like to talk, or where would you like to start first?
I would say, Jamie, one of the things that I wanted to mention, that the overall theme at build, is there is this new kind of paradigm that was actually shared, which is basically agentic web. And pretty much everything that we will talk about is referring to that, right? And not just agentic web, open agentic web. That kind of was a theme at the Microsoft build, which is what, like, you will be seeing that reflected in, for example, the new models which are open source. A lot of focus on the open source models. There are a lot of frameworks and the tools that Microsoft itself has actually made open. there is a lot of open framework adoption, whether it's MCP or A2A, as well as this whole orchestration between the agents and agents everywhere, right? So that was really the summary in 3 words: open agentic web out of Bill.
Yeah, and I could even take that one step further. I would say it's an open agentic operating system.
Mm.
We're not going to cover it in depth today on this episode, but what was also announced at Build was the Windows AI Foundry, which is really the evolution of the Windows Copilot runtime, being able to unify and be a reliable platform for AI-based developers and life cycles to be included within the operating system. Just think about that and let that sit in or set in for a little bit. It's being bringing in the capability of having the Windows 11 operating system to be aware of agents through A2A and the MCP protocol, which I'm still trying to wrap my head around that and what that will mean for us going down the road of development and what it will mean for us as consumers and users of the operating system. But make no mistake, it is a big shift in the way and the functionality of what the Windows operating system will be. So Windows ML or Windows um, this agentic system of the Windows AI platform will be that major cornerstone. Kind of going along with that as well. Like I said, we're not really going to go in depth, but I'm mentioning it anyway. Another one of the things that were announced at Build was this concept of doing AI Foundry local. Now, what does that mean? It actually means being able to bring the large language models, leveraging hardware like the NVIDIA NIMs, to be able to allow these different LLMs, small language models, to be able to run on local hardware. So we've had that a little bit with the ability, with different chipsets and being able to take it to a smaller platform, but this will be able to run within the Azure AI Foundry ecosystem and all the other things that come along with it on a smaller quote unquote device, or bring it local. So again, all these things that certainly we'll get into more depth as they get a little bit more exposure and a little bit more baked, and when people really jump onto these things. But just putting it out there now that these are some of the major shifts or changes that are coming forth with the Windows platform. So with that being said, like we kind of just alluded to, there's a lot that is coming down the pike for the AI agentic tools that were announced. And I say tools, it's really the ecosystem of the platform over at Build. So let's take a sneak peek into that. So, this is the Azure AI Foundry. There's a lot of announcements here. So let's try to unpack them. Let's take them one by one.
Yeah, I mean, like as you say, there's just so much going on there. So let's start with, like, I think let's talk about the models, right? We love to talk about the models, and there are tons of actually models that were also thrown in. So now the Azure AI Foundry also has Grok 3 available. And in fact, Elon Musk was also actually as part of the keynote, remotely there was a video actually recorded, and then Satya and Elon talking about it. So Grok 3 is now available, not just available, but basically hosted and serviced by Microsoft. So it's going to be available completely in the control of Microsoft. There is also actually a bunch of other models that, like Flux Pro 1.1, which is basically from Black Forest Labs. The model, they're really good at all these video content or image creation kind of models. In fact, I believe Grok also uses a Flux behind to
Yes.
actually generate the media. And then, of course, Sora is coming out soon as well. It will be available in the Azure OpenAI also. And bigger thing is that, like, now they have like 1900 plus models. I think the only thing that is missing is now the Gemini, Amazon Nova, and Anthropic Claude from the Azure AI Foundry, because now they have 10,000 plus Hugging Face models also available in Foundry, right? So I think it's just amazing, like 11,000 almost plus models choices which are available within the Foundry. Probably this is the biggest collection of the models right now among all the hyperscalers.
Yeah, definitely. It was, we kind of heard the rumors around Grok being added to to the mix, which is great. And I know the next iteration of Grok is theoretically right around the corner. And so if we see the same things with OpenAI, we should get, those latest versions of Grok coming to the Azure Foundry model ecosystem shortly thereafter. So yeah, having model choices is a great thing, and it just adds to our arsenal.
Yeah, and while it's a great thing, it is also it can create confusion because sometimes like how do you know which model to use, and this is where I think this is another great launch that was made, which is smart like model router in the Foundry model. So essentially, using this Foundry, the model router, you can actually rely on it to choose the best model for whatever task that you're giving it to. Like it could it could choose, I think, based on the cost or the quality or the latency, those kind of parameters, and you can actually essentially rely on it to choose the right model. I believe that is right now limited to the OpenAI models, but it can be
Yeah,
extended to the others as well.
yeah, it is. I actually was using it yesterday for a proof of concept that I was involved in. So it's a model router. It literally is called the model is a model router, and underneath it goes through. Um, it basically automatically decides whether or not to use um, GPT 4.0, GPT 4.1, 4.1 mini, 4.1 nano, and oh 04 mini. So that's the determination that it takes at call time, basically at inference time, and it will make that decision based on what it sees in your prompt, your question, and it automatically determines, well, what's the level of complexity? Which model do I need? What I find, well, that's interesting in and of itself, right? But what even on the model card when you're bringing it up inside of Foundry, what's touted is cost savings, and it kind of makes sense because you're not going to be using the GPT 4.1 model every call. It's going to use maybe that smaller model, or maybe you're not going to be using the oh 04 reasoning model all the time. So what is touted here is a cost savings, and off the top of my head, I think it was like a 60% cost savings based upon existing testing that was done before this was released. So that's pretty impactful to have something that automatically routes and directs into the most appropriate model to handle that request while at the same time saving you money, which is great.
And I'm assuming that this goes out of job once the GPT-5 comes. So if it is limited to OpenAI, it will go out of job. But I believe the plan is to extend it to all other models as well.
Yeah, I would assume that when GPT-5 comes out, it's going to be costly as well. So you still may want a model router underneath the covers.
Yeah, that is true. Are there like knobs where you can say that, okay, like balance it like between the cost, quality, latency, etc. Can we set up those settings right now? Is that going to be available immediately, or will that be something of a future?
I did not see that while I was testing or using it. It's literally just like any other model that you would deploy inside of the Foundry, inside of Foundry Studio when you're working, inside of your project within the hub. So once you deploy it, you could put system messages against that model, maybe to direct it in some way, but there's nothing specific about that model when it's deployed. It's about how and when you're using it, whether or not it's in the playground or things that you might be doing from an application development perspective, sending the appropriate system message in when you're making that inference call.
Awesome. And I believe that there is another announcement related to Foundry models being accessible via a unified API plus MCP server. MCP was everywhere. I mean, that's another theme. Seemed like the bill everywhere. MCP was there.
Yeah, it's almost similar with how many times can you say Copilot? Yeah, there was a lot of times MCP was mentioned in it, and it goes back to just making it easier for developers. The semantic kernel and I'm going to go off on a tangent here, but semantic kernel has a model inference API that I could use, and it's focused on not every model, but if you're switching back and forth to like something like a Llama model, OpenAI, and a Phi model and Mistral, you don't have to quote unquote pull in different APIs or different construct to do that. You could do that under just a plain old semantic kernel implementation API. This is sort of the same concept, but allowing it to be within the Foundry models. So it's a unifying API for accessing, doing inferencing, as well as then being able to tie that back to the MCP server. So it's all about making things easier for the developers.
True. And Jamie, there are tons of other things also that were announced. For example, on the agentic orchestration, where we are now supporting, of course, the MCP, the agent service is you can basically make the agents which are compatible with MCP. You can consume them, right? They can become like a server. You can also actually they will also support the open standard like agent to agent, right? The A2A framework from Google, and of course there is essentially the semantic kernel, Microsoft's own framework, as well as the AutoGen. Both basically there's a unification between them, right, for the agent orchestration. So there was a lot of stuff about the agentic orchestration as well as a theme.
Yeah,
Um,
and this is super important. It's multi agents are going to be de facto. You're not going to be able to build Gen AI or agentic systems just on single agents alone. If you do, it's going to be a monolithic application, and go back 30 years in the way that most organizations or people built applications. You would be in that same route. So you want to think about ways of tying agents together, whether or not it's on different platforms or not. So, this notion of connected agents, being able to call in through from one agent to the next, that existed within semantic kernel. I was able to do that months ago through semantic kernel. But what is different now, and as you already mentioned it, is at least from the Microsoft standpoint, there were competing frameworks to be able to do multi-agency. Semantic kernel will do it. You had AutoGen, you have Magentic One. These are all like at least those last one was a derivative of AutoGen. But what is now happening within Foundry is this ability to actually bring those things together to create these connected systems, and also tying that back into these open protocols with the agent to agent protocol, which was created by Google. So you have choice now as a developer. Am I doing? I could even use A2A to call directly from one agent to the next inside of the Microsoft Foundry system. Do I need to do that? No, but you could. And especially if I needed to go from let's say a Google platform to Microsoft, and at the same time go to ServiceNow. Sorry, Salesforce or Agentforce, I could do that because I'm using these open protocols to do it. So again, it's to me, this is about enabling the agentic world to be easier from a development standpoint.
Yeah, the build was more like Woodstock. I think there was a lot of love messages thrown around in terms of Microsoft. Like, I'm like surprised to be honest, because in the past, a lot of these companies have really competed vigorously. But the theme is what I see in the new Microsoft is really a lot about partnership and collaboration, right? Having grok models included now in the foundry, right? Sam Altman was also part of the same keynote, as one of our colleague put it, right, that like basically we are becoming Switzerland of the AI race, essentially getting everything together. Whether it's like open source models, whether it's grok, xai, no matter what, meta, everybody will have a place there. We are working with Snowflake, we are working with Google, right? I mean, adopted their framework, and we are now making our own. It's a really positive sign, to be honest. Like, I mean, as a what I see is that as an enterprise customer, the theme was that, okay, hey, everything open will be adopted. That's a clear message that was sent, and we basically work with everybody. There are nothing off limits. Even though we work with OpenAI, doesn't mean that we do not work with Grok. I think that was kind of a messages that I see reflecting in pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, I would agree. It's this we work together, work well with all, which is a great example on what's on this slide. Um, we see things here as it relates to, well, what can you do inside of Foundry about importing agents, right? So it's what's out there in the world, right? And as we said, there's things that are already already out there around using the A2A protocol. There's other things as well. Didn't get a lot of attention, but Microsoft is also building an agent protocol. Um, it's maybe, I'll put it this way, it's the special sauce that Microsoft is focusing on, a yet another option. I'll just leave it at that. So that's something that you can import external agents if they prescribe to that agent protocol. Likewise, you could also expose an agent that you've built inside of Foundry through not only the A2A, tying back into MCP for quote unquote knowledge connections, but also being able to use that agent protocol as well. So there's a lot going on with that open support for various different protocols.
Yeah, in fact, you reminded me, Jamie, that another thing that Microsoft also talked about was the NL Web, the natural language web, and this was being it's an open framework that Microsoft defined as what the HTML was to the web. That is what the NL Web is for the AI, in the sense that essentially websites and the companies who have the website, they already publish data, right, with the RSS format or schema.org format, and like a kind of semi-structured data. And what they can do is they can make that available using this framework, which is also MCP compatible. So that could become like a, basically it becomes like an MCP server based on your data, your web data, your website data can become like that extensible service essentially, and it can be consumed by the other like the clients, for example, they can consume that as a feed and include that in the results, for example. So like what we have seen, people doing that with their own internal files, etc., extending that using the MCP framework. Now you can do that with your website. And by the way, the guy who actually is leading that effort, Jamie, his last name is Guha. He is also the inventor of RSS and schema.org kind of framework. So essentially, basically has joined Microsoft now, and it is his pet project to drive that. So who basically he has a tons of experience creating this kind of framework. So I think the NL Web could become a particularly a very popular choice in the future. Let's see that will go.
So we're not done. There's a lot more around what was announced. So that was just the openness and the model choice selection. Let's also talk about the agentic retrieval. Do you want to take this one, Shadab, and I'll jump in?
Yeah, this one's actually pretty interesting, Jamie. This one is where basically we do the search all the time, and we use Azure AI search, for example, in Azure, but you can use the Elasticsearch, you can do the other APIs as well. Essentially, there are options like semantic search, and you use the ranking and all those kind of things. But this is actually new kind of a way of doing the search, like basically agentic retrieval, where the agents are actually creating a search plan, right? So they're planning the search. They will run the kind of queries in parallel term. There will be like parallel efforts, parallel subqueries. They will get the results. They will then merge the results. And this whole searching is not just about based on search query, but also the conversation history that is going on. So a lot more context goes in planning this search. And as you can see on the screen, there are like query one, query two, parallel subqueries going on. LLM is actually being used for planning this search, which is basically GPT-4 or GPT 4.1 model is being used to create the query plan. And then the results are being merged together, synthesized, and then basically sent back. So the query results are much more intelligent. The query results are essentially a comprehensive, and basically they are claiming that it can give you much better results. For example, like 40% up in response quality, and this is now in public preview.
Hmm.
It would be
Okay.
interesting to try this out.
Yeah, no, definitely it will be. I mean, it's all about improving the search capabilities. So yeah, definitely interested in seeing this in action. Haven't tried it yet, but definitely planning on it next week.
Yeah, I mean, like search is not settled. Search is still evolving. That's amazing thing, right? I mean, with the AI and we saw that in the Google I/O as well. Essentially, they are talking about bringing
Yep.
AI mode in this. Like they already have AI overview and mode. Like they are going to bring that. It's just amazing, right? How the AI is actually totally revamping the search, which we thought was kind of settled. Google was undefeated champ, but no, like Perplexity is a great example. They are basically redefining the search itself. So a lot to happen in the search.
So one of the other things that we just mentioned before was Foundry Local. As you said before, it's being able to take Foundry, um, take the capabilities of that, but then run it on local devices. So think about the ecosystem that already exists out there between the Microsoft Windows devices. It's also going to be coming to the Mac OS as well, to be able to run um, Foundry local. So this is really good for those ideal edge cases, where you potentially have sensitive data or limited connectivity. Certainly, it could be another scenario that again, you don't want to bring it up to the web, or two, you don't even have the ability to connect to the web. So this is where we can leverage the greatness in terms of what is there within Foundry, and do it locally, while at the same time taking advantage of those foundational models.
This is pretty good. I think there are still many companies I've seen they're having holdouts. Basically, they don't want to use things in cloud, and this is a great tool for them to. I remember that like they can't use the Azure OpenAI models in this. There are only certain models that has to be used. I think it's a list of five Microsoft's own five family of models. There is Mistral, I think, is also available. Meta Llamas is available, as well as I think some version of DeepSeek and Quen from Alibaba. These are some of the models choices which are available in Foundry Local. Um, and this seems like Jamie. It seems like it's on the pattern of Azure Local, which was actually announced in the last Ignite as well. I was wondering how this will be different from kind of disconnected containers model, which also exists for Azure AI services like document intelligence.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, it's in the same realm. There's also some discussion of this being able to integrate with Azure Arc later on as well, or will be coming out. So yeah, to be honest, I don't know the details on how this is being run, but I would assume it's actually being run in a containerized environment. So it probably leverages some of that same technology.
yeah, but interesting. I think it opens up a possibility for some of the customers who have not been comfortable with sending the data to the cloud yet.
Yep.
Okay. Um, Yeah, I think, and we already talked about a little bit about Foundry Labs earlier. This is also a part of the AI Foundry. You don't see that directly, but that Foundry Labs essentially is a place where you have a lot of experimental models coming out from Microsoft Research. It was already announced a couple of months ago. You have like different framework like Magentic, Type Agent, models, world models, Project Emily, things like that. These are all experimental stuff that comes out of Microsoft Research, but it's not going to be limited to that. It will also have other ecosystem partners, the other third party who can also provide the experimental models as part of the Foundry lab. So it's like essentially just a lab, as the name suggests, all experimental stuff.
Yep. Like we said at the top of this at the top of this episode, there's a lot that came out with Build, topics that we're not even going to, get into, let alone even mention. Just as an example here, we mentioned about NL Web, but there's a whole slew of security capabilities as well that are tied into AI. Everything from Microsoft Purview and its capabilities around posture management, data loss prevention, um, and a couple of other key things around that. But one thing that I do want to point out around the security space is something called Microsoft Entra Agent ID, which is in preview or just announced to go into preview. Do you want to lighten our audience on what Entra Agent ID is and why it might be useful?
Yeah, actually, in fact, Jamie, that was actually one of my favorite one at the bill. The anti-agent ID, essentially, you have the already an enterprise ID for every user, right? That helps people authenticate and then make sure that they can be trusted to let them into the system. But what about the agents? People are developing agents all the time. There will be like 100. There will be proliferation of the agents everywhere. What if they run amok, right? I mean, how will you control them, right? Their access, how will you track them? And this is where this anti-agent ID essentially is an identifier of every agent that you will create, let's say in the Copilot Studio or in the Foundry. By default, Microsoft will create an Entra agent ID for them, and that would be available within the Entra tenant. You can actually see every agent that is created in this platform. Soon they will be making that available within M365 Copilot agent builder and things like that as well. So every agent that you will build in the enterprise using Microsoft, the platform, they will have an agent identifier. That is what the Entra agent ID is, and that would be then visible within the Entra tenant. So there you can actually see, okay, this agent was built, and this agent has access to these particular set of applications. So it will establish that connect, and then you can evaluate them. Like, maybe as a security overseer, you can define that, oh no, I don't want to allow this agent, things like that. So you can do a lot of things. But I think this is amazing, because otherwise this could become a really big security posture threat.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great piece of technology. Like you said, you need to identify agents, and this ties into some other things I'll talk about a little bit later on. But having this ability to tie back into Entra and aligning an agent is super helpful and critical. So, like I said, there are many different announcements that are coming out of Build. By the way, we're recording this on a Thursday, May 22nd, and Build is wrapping up. I think it is today. So things are still being announced. This is probably what I'm getting at. So this doesn't end just with the Foundry side of things. So there are a number of announcements for Copilot as it relates to agents or in some form of fashion leveraging or using an agent. Now you see this long laundry list of things here, and this is even whittled down from some of the extended capabilities. But there will be a couple that I want to highlight. It's actually even more than a couple. It's about 6 or 7. But the agent store, being able to bring your own model from Foundry into Copilot Studio, multi-agent orchestration in Copilot Studio, similar to what we just talked about within Foundry, support for MCP, being able to do the Fabric data agent, which I know we talked about on the previous episode, but natural language to, in this case, it's SQL or T-SQL, DAX, and also KQL or the Kusto query language, being able to be supported through Copilot Studio. And then last but not least is Copilot tuning. So I'm going to cover all those. But before we do that, let me kind of give you a little teaser. This will be a short little demo. Not going to take too long. It's about 1 minute and 40 seconds. But you will see in this demo some of these key announcements, things like MCP support, and agent orchestration available and capable within Copilot Studio. So as they say, let's roll the tape.
Here's a quick tour of Copilot Studio, the place to build AI agents with natural language. Let's start with the homepage, where you can select a pre-built agent that's ready to work for your team or organization. Here you can choose a template with a common scenario and customize it to your needs. To build your own agent, type in what you'd like it to do and let Copilot Studio build the agent for you. With knowledge, you can add data sources for the agent to use, like websites, files, or third-party data, with over 1,500 connectors available. Now let's give our agent tools. The Model Context Protocol connects Copilot Studio directly to your existing knowledge servers and data sources, so it's easier for you to build robust agents. Use Prompt when you want to give your agent specific capabilities. like using AI to process text, images, or documents. And if you want your agent to complete a set of tasks or processes, use agent flows so it can follow a series of actions. With triggers, you can choose from the 50+ triggers that prompt an agent to complete a process on your behalf, depending on what you want to do. And that's not all. With agent orchestration, you can even connect multiple agents so that they work together to complete processes more effectively. Once you've built an agent, test it to see if it's working, publish it to your channels, and use analytics to see how it's performing. Build agents that work for you with Copilot Studio.
Yeah, so that was pretty amazing. Like I said,
Awesome.
a lot of new things inside of Copilot Studio that you just had seen.
I think Copilot is really the UI for AI, as Satya says. I mean, it's really there's so much investment, and particularly Copilot Studio has become one of my another favorite platform now. It's like really doing some stuff and making it easier for people to build this stuff directly without having to know technology, know-how.
Yep. Yeah, it connects things for you. So let's talk about some of those pieces. Like I said, there's a lot in here, but one of the first ones I want to talk about is an agent store, and you kind of talked a little bit about it when you mentioned being able to have the Entra agent ID, being able to recognize things. Well, this is an actual UI that helps to focus on the agents that are constructed. So this is something that will automatically, quote unquote, recognize the Microsoft built agents. So these are the ones obviously that we put out, third-party agents, as well as custom agents that you build. Our first scenario here is going to be around those agents that are constructed within the Copilot chat or Copilot Studio for building those. So literally Agent Builder or Copilot Studio. This will also extend out over time into other agents that are constructed within an enterprise organization. So that is announcement number one. Second thing, and this one's a big one. If you've done any work with Copilot Studio previously before build, you know that you had no choice of actually changing the underlying model, the large language model that was being used, unless you did some like more pro code type of development, and then at that point, you're actually probably not in the realms of using Copilot Studio at that pace anyway. But what was being announced at build is this ability to bring any model that is deployed inside of Azure AI Foundry into Copilot Studio and doing it through a graphical interface. So again, this puts the power of what you might do from a pro code perspective through Azure AI Foundry and all of its models that we just talked about before, even things like Rock, being able to bring that into Copilot Studio. So I'll continue because this keeps on going. So we talked about multi-agent orchestration inside of Foundry. Well, now you have that capability inside of Copilot Studio. So prior to this, it was you build an agent and you build an agent and you build an agent. It was literally a single agent platform tool. That is no longer the case. So I could do multi-agent orchestration directly within Copilot Studio. So being able to work with, something that just might do calculations, couple that with a Copilot Studio logic flow where I could use Copilot to build that. Well, that might be my calculation agent, where I might have another agent that I build in Copilot Studio that is focused on being able to retrieve data. So this is where I could actually have agent specialization, where I call on that to interconnect all those different pieces. So as I said, this is in preview now within Copilot Studio, and you can cross platform orchestrate as well. I don't want you to lose sight of that. So I could tie in agents not only within Copilot Studio, but also agents that are developed through Azure AI Foundry. I could also do things where I'm actually pulling in agents that I might do through the Copilot SDK. So really this opens up a load of flexibility. Soon to be also released is being able to leverage some of the cross agent orchestration if I'm building things inside of Fabric, aka data agents inside of there. This is not to say that I can't use agents today inside of Fabric. It's the ability to multi-agent orchestrate with those pieces. So
This is big. I think, Jamie, so far the Copilot Studio was limited to single agent, and I think this multi-agentic kind of like step up the game for Copilot Studio now.
yeah, definitely. I mean, that was one of the things I would say, was a detractor from some of the early adopters. I mean, while you could build, beautiful agents in Copilot Studio, it was only a single agent. So this will be dropping into public preview next month. Like I said, it's late April right now. So, within the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to actually kick the tires on this for yourselves because it'll be available to everybody as a public preview feature.
And plus, you can access all the models from the Azure AI Foundry. I mean, this is so essentially it is becoming like a interface, the user interface on the top of AI Foundry, kind of, right? Because now you have
Yeah,
the entire power of that.
yeah, exactly. It's sort of like the lines are blurring a little bit between, low code to pro code, which I think is good. You get that choice. If you want to stay within Visual Studio Code and build things within Foundry and semantic kernel, go ahead. If you want to just build straight agents inside of Copilot Studio, you can, and you could also integrate agents together through that multi-agent orchestration. But now, if you want to start blending those things together, especially like pulling in the models, you can certainly do that. So, as I said, it allows a user, whoever you are, whether or not you're that pro code developer user or this, hey, just give me a simple interface to build agents, you could do that. Also, one of the things that were announced for Copilot Studio is the ability to use the model context protocol. So directly within Studio, and you saw that through the quick little demo that we just had shown, the ability to use the model context protocol here. So there's an ever-growing number of MCP servers or the marketplace. Those will be fully exposed inside of Copilot Studio. It's almost like, hey, here's my marketplace of what's available. Let me choose from those different MCP servers so I can connect into whatever that data or knowledge is that you want to interconnect into your agent. So still moving forward when I talk about agents. So this is now native support for the Fabric data agent inside of Copilot Studio. So just as a refresher for everybody, Fabric data agent allows you to do the natural language to SQL or natural language to DAX, which is the quote unquote query language for semantic models inside of Fabric or inside of Power BI, or being able to do natural language to the Custo query language. This is the real-time intelligence embedded within Fabric. So the data agent, if you create a data agent inside of Fabric, it could pull from those multiple data sources, semantic model, Custo database, a data warehouse, a lakehouse, and is able to construct a query going against any of those things and return back the result sets. Well, all right, that's great. And it lives inside of Fabric, but you want to use that inside of things like building agents for its knowledge. So that's what is now available as a public preview inside of Copilot Studio. So if you want to ground your agent on some knowledge, quote unquote, that knowledge piece of data, I can do that now with very simply just saying, yes, I want to use this data agent. So this very much simplifies the ability for what you would have had to do basically through your own pro code of creating a natural language to SQL, just using that one simple scenario. All that complexity is now removed. Create a data agent inside of Fabric and use that data agent inside of Copilot Studio for that agent that you're building. And like I just said, you could have a multi-agent orchestration inside of Copilot Studio. So if you really think about it now, I could surface up data and treat that as a RAG-based agent and then couple that with other things. So it makes the whole notion of being able to retrieve data from, structured or semi-structured data, basically a breeze now. So I see you're totally awestruck.
I'm like, I'm just thinking that, it's so empowering. It's like essentially that whole gamut of the continuum of AI platform, as we call it, right? The M365 Copilot, and then Copilot Studio, and then AI Foundry, and then Fabric is so well connected now. We had a lot of trouble earlier finding the connection and integrating them. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it just makes it so much easier.
Yep.
One last thing just to mention on this data agent, you can read it here on the slide, but it also, it leverages the security constructs that are within Fabric. So the row level security, column level security, those are all still respected, and the permissions actually flow through from a user that's using it, because that gets sent over in the Fabric, and Fabric applies its security permissions. All right. So one other last thing on the Copilot side, like I said, there's a lot. I'm only scratching the surface from some of my favorite features of, build and Copilot with agents. This one kind of blew me away. And I say that because I've tried to do this on my own through Foundry, through even before Foundry was a thing. And this is about tuning. So what does this mean? This literally means this is fine tuning without all the complexities of having to know how to fine tune. So Copilot makes this very easy in the sense that, all right, I've got some, model, I've created some context, so I have data, right? So what this does is you provide your corporate information. All right, so here's some other details on our business specific terminology, right? That's a great example. Like what widgets do we create? So you provide information, and it literally could be through like a Word doc, a PDF, and through a few clicks you're going to tell Microsoft 365 Copilot, I want you to fine tune your responses based upon the data that I'm providing you. If I had to do that, and I'll go a little technical on you, in order to do that, before you had to create, a series of tuples, and you would feed that in to the model. Yes, we do have some wizards on the Foundry side to help, but you still need to know and create the various different tuples in the data sets. All that is removed. So this literally puts the power of fine tuning for a particular set of tasks into the hands of anybody and everybody within an organization. So you can go and create your, your prompts or your dialogue with it. Now, I will say this is an early access program. It's not available to everybody yet. I do believe there's some pretty stringent restrictions around this, that you have to have 5,000 or more seats of M365 Copilot. So yeah, this is not going to be available to everybody. Everybody out there. So if you've got, less than 5,000 seats, this is not going to be for you just yet. Do I see this being some of these restrictions being limited or reduced over time? Yeah, probably. But for now, like I said, early access program, it's 5,000 or more seat licenses of M365 Copilot. If that fits you, I would definitely say, take a look at this. It will certainly bring the capability of fine tuning to the fingertips of everybody within the org, at least those 5,000 or more people that actually have these Copilot licenses.
I agree. I think this is another amazing feature, where you can actually tune it not just with the knowledge, but in fact mimic the style of that particular company, the kind of language they use, etc. Right? So you can train it on those particular content. It reflects your style of how those. The other thing that also blew me was essentially um, the tuning will actually respect those permissions. So when you're tuning those these Copilot tuning, the content, when that is available to certain people, it will actually respect those permissions as well, which they have do not have the access to. because I think that would be awesome, right? Essentially, you're tuning a content. You don't want those who do not have access to that particular content, which is used for tuning, should not have the access to that via the tuned Copilot. So I think that would be another great feature of this as well, protecting the privacy and assuring the enterprises to, try this out.
So one last piece of news, and like I said, there's a lot even that we didn't cover, but some major announcements at Build focused around GitHub. And we're closing out with this one because Build is for the development community. GitHub is a developer-oriented piece, and there were some major announcements related to GitHub and AI and agents. Do you want to lighten the audience on some of the things that were announced?
Yeah, basically, the announcement was that okay, developers don't need to work anymore. They can just hire a agent to do their work, essentially delegate that. And there was actually a good demo by Satya himself, showing that okay, he has been assigned an issue, and then he delegate that work to the agent, and then agent is starting to work on it and making those changes. It was actually not an issue, it was a feature request, I think,
Yep.
creating some sort of a drop down, etc., in an app, and then he assigned it to the Copilot agent, and that started working while Satya was delivering the keynote, right? So it was pretty good story there. Essentially, GitHub Copilot coding agent, which is basically now available, and then developers can assign the Copilot a range of development tasks, from autonomously refactoring code, or like improving the test coverage, or fixing defects, or implementing new features. So that's what you can do with that agent. Something I think similar to what Jamie, you have also shown in the past, like using in the cursor and tools and others, like the agentic capabilities. um, there is also there are new app modernization capabilities, because this is also another thing that developer work on. For example, migrating or upgrading the code, right? Like from Java or .NET, etc. So essentially now the developer can actually offload this kind of consuming tasks to update, upgrade, or modernize Java and .NET apps in GitHub Copilot. So that can also be taken care by the GitHub Copilot. um, One thing that I think kind of was freaking some of the DevOps community people was another SRE agent that was also talked about. This is essentially a service reliability engineering, right? The agent which basically help the cloud developers kind of reduce the cost of operations. It basically monitors what problems are happening. It will keep an eye on those kind of issues, and then when it encounters some sort of an alert, it will basically act on it. It will analyze the root cause. It will monitor the alerts. It will change the workflows, etc., and then basically keep the apps adhering to the SLAs, etc. That's what the SRE agent will do, because this is what a big spend area, right? I mean, a lot of companies have to spend a lot of time, and it's cumbersome as well. So I think this agent was also pretty popular as well. We will see how the idea is, I think, great. We'll see how effectively it does that job, because it is a bit tedious job for a lot of people.
Yeah, I guess my perspective on all these is these are great progresses on a focused area of use around agents, like you just said, the GitHub Copilot coding agent, the SRE agent. I see a lot of focus on like a particular skill set that we collectively within the industry are aligning our resources to build those tools that are going to help developers. There's a slight twist to that, however, in that as these coding agents get better and as they're integrated into these different tool sets, like you talked about, Windsurf, Cursor, Visual Studio Code, and there's tons of other ones as well out there. They're getting much better, and they're getting better at what can be developed by agents. So much so that if you look at Microsoft, you look at Google, other firms, large firms that do development, a lot of them are saying, yeah, right now, 30% of the code that's created isn't created by developers. directly. It's created by these agents. There's some companies that say they want to get to 70, 80, 90% developed. And to my point where I'm making with this is that we're seeing great strides in the development industry or coding industry right now for building these types of agents that can do this. I think we're going to get to the point where these are going to be very, very robust. Is that in another 6 months? Is that a year? I'm not sure. But what I will say is that once these things get done with having a very robust coding agent, like what GitHub, Copilot coding agent came out, we talked about Codex One, literally just last episode, right? So we're seeing all these advancements. Once we get to a place where it's advanced enough, what's the next thing that's going to be driving all of these agents? Is it maybe something within, customer support? Is it marketing? I'm just throwing that out there because I think our audience is probably savvy enough. They're the ones that are already thinking about these things, but what's the next thing after that? Because that's going to be the next wave of agents that hopefully you all that are listening to this will be developing after the coding agent comes. Because again, my point here is that we'll have all these coding agents. That's great. How do we leverage them as a community? Because we shouldn't be thinking about you as a developer, but it's now you as a person who's helping to orchestrate these agents that can develop things for us. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox, but just wanted to leave that with a train of thought for folks to go
That's a
away
good
with.
thought, Jamie. It is like something that I'd heard earlier, right? Don't think of yourself as a coder or a developer. Think of yourself as a builder, right?
Yeah.
It's that kind of paradigm shift that you have to actually look into, and then builder goes beyond just the developer, right? That's what it is. To be honest, like sometimes, like there is hope, there is a fear. Of course, it freaks some people out that okay, what I'm going to do now with SRE is coming, But I think again, this is a automatic evolution of the technology. It is just going to continue to get better. We just need to find out the strength that we have, right? Where do we invest our time in learning the skills that we still continue to do better? And it's not about surviving AI. It's basically finding the balance, what we do best and what AI can do best.
Yeah, agreed.
Great. I think we could even cover a lot of other things, etc., as well, like including Windows AI Foundry. Jamie, some of those stuff. Maybe in some of the next episode, we can sometime dig deeper into that. There are some like other stuff as well. Across the tool, there were a lot of other AI announcements, but I think we covered pretty much most of the major ones today.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. And like we said, next time we'll dig into the other conferences like Google I/O next week, next episode.
Absolutely. Everybody, this is a long weekend, so enjoy. Most of the people might be taking time off. I am, Jamie is, and we'll be back next week. Until then, have a good break.
Likewise, catch you later, everybody.
Bye, everyone.